Welcome to Alien Wisconsin. Today we're doing a reaction video, which is something we don't normally do, but it's very important when certain cultural moments come up on the UAP, UFO, alien topics. So today I'm joined by one of my good friends, Jeff with Badgerland Legends, and he's going to be watching the Joe Rogan Donald Trump podcast with me. And we're going to only be watching the part that pertains to the UFO, UAP phenomena. Just think it's going to be something interesting to have someone else's perspective, not just my own. And I think we're just going to jump right in. Do you have any questions, Jeff?
Let's do this.
All right, let's do this.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
One of the things that I want to talk to you about is the JFK files. And one of the things that you said was that if they showed you what they showed me, this was your quote, you wouldn't want people to know it either.
So I opened them up partially. I was met with, from good people, good people that were well-meaning. Mike Pompeo was one of them. He's a good person. They called me, they said, "Sir, would rather have you not." And I did open them. But I was asked by some people not to open them. There's a Martin Luther King file, too, by the way, that they'd like to see. I don't know if you know, but there is that. But JFK in particular. So they called me, a lot of good people called me, people that that you would find reasonable people. And they asked me not to do it. So I said, well, we'll close it for another time. But if I win, I'm going to open them up. I'm just going to open enough.
Why didn't you open it up the first time, though?
Because a lot of times,
what was the hesitation, though?
Addresses, people that are still living. There are people that are affected, and there could be some national security reason that I don't have to necessarily know about. But some very good, talented people asked me not to do it. I opened it up, and then they said, "Would it be possible for us to do that a different day?"
How much of it did you read into?
I think it's going to be just fine to open it. Let me put it that way. I think it's fine. It's going to be time. It's a cleansing. It's really a cleansing. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it immediately, almost immediately upon entering office.
Well, the thing, when people look at it from the outside and you sort of imagine what could be a reason why they would not release those files, it would be there's people that were implicated in the assassination.
Yeah. Well, when there are living people, you generally tend not to want to do it. When people are still living
people that formerly worked for the government.
And living people that were somehow involved in it, and you tend not to do that. But it's time to open them. I can't tell you whether or not they're going to find anything of interest. And I did partially open. I think I've opened 50%, but I was asked not to do it, and I thought that was a reasonable ask, but now I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it very soon. There's a lot of interest in it.
One of the things that
there's a lot of interest in the people coming from space,
Yes.
And I know you're interested in that.
Oh, I'm very interested in that. How much did they tell you about that?
A lot.
Really?
Yeah.
What did they tell you? How much can you tell?
So
how's that work? Is it like super top secret?
I can tell,
Tell me.
Well, based on Hunter Biden, I can say whatever the hell I want, right? But no. But I interviewed a few people. It's never been my thing, I have to be honest. I have never been a believer. I have people that Area 51 or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the #1 tourist attraction in the whole country or something. Area 51 in Las Vegas. Do you know that, right?
Sure. I know what it is.
So anyway, but it's a big tourist thing. So I interviewed jet pilots that say they saw something. If you saw them, you'd love to have them as
I've had a couple in here. Commander David Fravor.
Yeah.
I had him in, who had that sighting in 2004. Very compelling with video evidence, radar evidence. Ryan Graves.
I don't believe his name, but I interviewed jet pilots that were solid people. Perfect. I mean, great pilots, great everything. And they said, we saw things, sir, that were very strange. Like a round ball, but it wasn't a comet or a meteor. It was something. And it was going 4 times faster than an F-22, which is a very fast plane, And it was round. which is in theory a great shape.
So when you were talking to these people, was this something that you were compelled to have conversations about? Was this your personal interest?
A little bit. It's not a great interest for me, but it's a little interest. I get that question as much as almost any question. Do you think that we have aliens coming, flying around or whatever?
What do you think?
There's no reason not to. I mean, there's no reason not to think that Mars and all these planets don't have life, because
Mars, we've had probes there and rovers, and I don't think there's any life there.
Well, maybe it's life that we don't know about. Maybe
there was life there at one point in time. This is the speculation about Mars, that Mars had an atmosphere at one point in time, a long time ago, that could support life. It also had large bodies of water, but we've had no evidence of even bacterial life that exists on Mars. But the universe is pretty vast. It's not been a big thing
for me. I mean, when I looked at what China did to this, they would have never done it with me, where they put the balloon up, and a lot of people thought for a little while that was one of these things. So,
that's a lot of the speculation too, that some of these drones that hover over battleships, that these are Chinese drones, and that they're not UFOs.
They could be also.
There's some super sophisticated.
But I did interview, let's say 3 or 4 guys and without tremendous interest, if you had them. As I said, you'd love to have them as your children. Solid, beautiful people. They said, "Sir, there's something there."
There's something there.
Said it, yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to quite a few of them.
They're not conspiracy guys.
Well, I mean, just the Commander David Fravor thing in 2004 off the coast of San Diego, they clocked that thing going from 50,000 feet above sea level to 50 in a second.
Yeah.
They don't know what it is.
That's tough to beat.
Yeah, they saw something in the water. It was hovering over that something that was making a disturbance in the water. They got video evidence of this thing. 2 different fighter jets with pilots in them saw it. There's, visual evidence, photographic evidence, video evidence, radar evidence. Whatever the hell it is, it moves in a way that would turn a human being into jello if they were inside of it. The G-force, no one would survive.
Oh,
so what is that? And it doesn't have a heat signature. They don't know what their propulsion system was. But
when you fly in some of these jets, these pilots have to be in great shape.
Oh, yeah. I flew with the Blue Angels once.
Yeah.
I got to fly. I guess it's an FA-18.
And those are older machines.
And they're crazy.
When you fly in some of these things,
it's
amazing. Yeah, but
I can imagine.
You got to be special.
Okay, so we both just watched it, and I'm kind of curious, what are your initial thoughts? It's only a day or so old, so what are your initial thoughts about, this election? And you can just start off kind of whatever you want, but we really want to focus on the UFO part.
Yeah, definitely. So just the Joe Rogan Donald Trump episode, it was highly anticipated just for topics like this. Trump, he has his own style. He's very freewheeling. He doesn't let facts get in the way of a good story, or doesn't get bogged down in the details of the situation. He's definitely hyperbolic in the way he comes across. So when he says something, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt to say, like, did it really happen that way, Donald? But the most surprising part I found about this is Rogan, he has like 2 main topics that he touches on over and over if you watch a lot of his podcasts or listen to them. It's the JFK files, and then like UFOs, or what some call the alien agenda.
Oh,
so for Trump to start, Joe started off the conversation by asking about the JFK releases and kind of like what his plan was for releasing them, why he didn't release them fully. And then Trump, he completely veers off into the UFO topic without Joe ever bringing it up, and I found that kind of entertaining.
Yeah, I actually thought that was really surprising, because I had kind of expected that this topic would have been brought up by Joe, and the fact that Trump kind of lumps the 2 topics together, which the general public doesn't see anything, that doesn't see JFK and UFOs connected at all. There are actually some like unusual, like rumored connections, but the more interesting thing, like the actual connection that I see that's like real and substantial, is that some of the UAP disclosure legislation was modeled after the JFK disclosure legislation. It was like literally copy paste kind of deal. Which is, a lot of people complain about that, because the JFK disclosure acts that were passed by the Clinton administration hasn't really worked out, you know? So, I mean, that's the real connection I see between those two topics, not necessarily, you know, that JFK, I don't know, whatever the other rumor is, but so I thought that was interesting that Trump kind of lumped them together.
Yeah, the one other thing that I kind of cringed about when I watched this clip initially, because I watched the clip before I actually watched the full interview, was that Trump, he has a style where he'll start with a topic and then he'll meander into something completely off topic, and then he'll come back to the topic, and he's even coined a phrase for it. He calls it the weave.
The weave.
So you have to remember, this was 2.5 hours, about 2.5 hours into the 3 hour conversation. And Joe, he had to like redirect him and get him back on topic several times, especially within like the first 45 minutes.
Sure.
But then once they settled in, it was kind of a more free flowing conversation. And it seems like Joe interrupted him several times when Don was just getting going. So you think if Donald was just allowed to have kept on going, what would have he said about this? Because it just yeah. Go ahead.
I kind of feel the same way you did, and one of the interesting things about this, I kind of just want to go back ever so slightly, is these kind of interviews are a new phenomena. They really are. Like, this is a traditional media has never sat down with politicians of, especially running for president, for a 3 hour interview. Unheard of, completely
Yes.
brand new concept in the media landscape. Because like the amount of stamina a politician needs and message discipline that they would need, like in a conventional world, like if you're not Donald Trump, if you're just like a normal politician, like being able to be like able to articulate 3 hours worth of policy and opinions and platform that's been kind of vetted by committees and focus group tested and all that, just it's an unthinkable idea. And so
Yeah, and for for Trump to go on there and just it sounded like they had planned for maybe an hour and a half, and then about 2.5 hours in, he's like, I'm having a great time, and it sounds like he may have been late for some other commitments that he was there for, but a platform like Rogan. I guess there is nothing bigger right now as far as the media landscape. And yes, for him to sit down and do 3 hours is just unbelievable. The one thing I found interesting there was when he kind of broached the subjects. He says, "It's never been my thing. I've never been a believer."
Yeah.
But then he kind of lended some credibility to the pilots that he had had close quarters with.
He's actually made 3 appearances on different podcasts where he kind of talks about this. And one of the bizarre Trumpian way he talks is to lend credibility to the story. He actually talks about the pilot's physical characteristics. For example,
did he say beautiful,
they're like,
beautiful young man or something like that?
Being Tom Cruise, like from Top Gun, and they're attractive and tall and have nice haircuts, and none of this has anything to do with like, I mean, it's interesting to me. It's like the veracity of someone's claim is often, in his mind, is often reinforced by what they physically look like, which I think is kind of a strange idea. Like someone's more truthful if they're well dressed, or less truthful if they're, a slob. I mean, maybe that's the business world he comes from, but that's his kind of like weird way of trying to be like, if I give the most generous interpretation of it, he's not saying that they are tinfoil hat people, that they are real people in the military who would be able to tell, oh, that's a jet, that's a DJI drone, and that's something that's completely different that we've never seen. I think that's what he's trying.
Yeah. I think that's what he was getting at, that these guys are upstanding citizens. They're clean cut. They're not cuckoo bananas with crazy hair that the normal media depiction of a conspiracy theorist.
I have an upcoming episode that's going to be going out right after this, where I really delve into how this election cycle, the 23-24 presidential election, has really put UFOs into the mainstream. There's been 4 political candidates who have discussed openly their policies on UFOs or alien disclosure, whatever you want to call the kind of like broad overarching topic, in a serious way. And that's never happened. The closest we've ever had is occasionally Jimmy Kimmel will ask a candidate on a comedy show, what do you know about aliens? Why would you tell us something? And, the candidates often laugh and then kind of maybe say something. And it's like, is that legitimate? Or I guess you could make the argument that Joe Rogan was originally a comedian, but it's hard for me to see Joe Rogan as a comedian because, and I'm not trying to be mean, but I've never really, I don't think he's that funny. I think he's a good podcast host, but I don't think of him as like someone who's funny. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think his stand up is the least interesting thing that he does. Whenever Joe Rogan comes out with a new special, it's not something that I rush out to see. But if he has an interesting guest on his podcast, I'm right there to click the play button and jump in to see what he has to say.
And
He's more interesting as a conversationalist than a comedian. I
well,
feel.
all of the reason I'm bringing that up is because I feel like this is a real interview where he's addressing policy. This isn't just for like some like gags or some laughs. This interview, I believe, has been. I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but I believe might be the most viewed political interview of all time already. Just like in the short lifespan it's had, and so putting the UFO topic, into the mainstream in such a profound way is really remarkable. Um, I kind of, he talks about how he kind of wants to disclose the JFK files, and then he goes right into the UFO files. I think there's an idea that he is gently signaling that he's pro some form of disclosure. I don't know if
I
you
think
read it that way.
that was, yeah, I could see that way. And just to your previous point about the prevalence of this political conversation being the most seen, it's funny to look at the statistics as far as on YouTube. With YouTube views, I believe the top one right now is Elon Musk with Joe Rogan, and the second one is I believe Bob Lazar.
Sure.
So it is fertile ground for the UFO topic, and for somebody as high profile as Joe Rogan to get a previous president and the odds-on favorite to be the next president to be on record talking about the UFO UAP phenomenon is quite remarkable.
And just in all fairness, I have been scouring for stances of Kamala Harris or Tim Waltz, and Kamala has only done one Jimmy Kimmel interview 4 years ago where she got a bad question that wasn't very clear that mentions UFOs, and she kind of brushes it off. And I understand that. I don't think that's we could play that clip, but there's not a lot to show you. It's just kind of mediocre. And I would love if the Democrats had sort of a response to this, or they articulated a UFO platform or UAP disclosure, or even more about government transparency. I know some politicians are very good about that on the Democratic side. And I talk about this more in my upcoming episode, that I feel like Republicans are better at, or more free about talking about UFOs, and that Democrats have actually gotten more done. So it's kind of like, it's not like there's a good party for this. It's not partisan, thank God. It's like, we don't want this to be a partisan issue. We really don't. We just want to get to the truth. We don't want to, be like, oh, well, the Democratic truth and the Republican truth. We just want it to be the truth.
Yeah, it would be interesting if one party came out and had that as a staple of their platform, was some kind of form of disclosure. I think that would just be kind of a fun thing to have on their ticket.
It would be interesting, and now 3 Republicans have addressed it, and at the time, John F. Kennedy was a Democrat when he made a UFO statement. So I kind of count him as a Democrat because he was running as one at the time when he made it. But I guess I think he's formally independent now, although maybe he's Republican, you could argue, because he's kind of endorsed Trump. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think you said JFK, but you mean RFK Jr.
I said the wrong RFK Jr. His
and yeah, so he's more or less an independent now. Started as a Democrat in the primary, and then kind of disavowed that to run independently. So it's interesting because RFK is kind of an open book. He'll talk about pretty much any topic intelligently. So that was I didn't get a chance to review his statement on that, but I know one other thing that we mentioned to kind of bring this back to a Wisconsin topic was JD Vance's statement in
Yeah,
Eau Claire just a
yeah.
couple
JD
weeks ago.
Vance brought up the UFO UAP topic in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and I believe I have really looked, and I can't seem to find any other vice presidential candidate who has done this during a stump speech as they run for president. And the thing I want to point out is like the comments that JD Vance makes are not particularly revelatory. He just says that he's curious about the UFO issue. Essentially, is what he says. And what's interesting to me is that when you run for president, it's now like $1 billion affair. This is not small potatoes. People usually aren't extemporaneously talking about, crap. They are anything you bring up is being watched by intelligence agencies all around the world and political people like ourselves to try to divine what is going to happen during the administration. So that's what they kind of talk about message discipline. And the idea that you would talk about UFOs, UAPs just willy nilly for no reason is very unlikely. I mean, whether you like JD Vance or not, he's perfectly aware of this. He knows that anything he says on the stump is going to be at least scrutinized and looked into and possibly used as a weapon against him by the opposing political factions. So I found that really fascinating, very exciting to see that, again, the Wisconsin connection. And speaking of the Wisconsin connection, this whole political cycle started when Chris Christie in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the Republican debates, got a UFO UAP question. And he answered that he would be pro disclosure, which is kind of interesting. But again, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, showing up again, Wisconsin being in the news and oddly the forefront of, or maybe not the forefront, but one of the people leading the pack in this kind of issue.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's funny just to see how many things come from Wisconsin as far as that. The famous David Grush hearings were chaired by Glenn Grothman of Wisconsin. So it seems like Wisconsin's always in the mix, no matter what there is to do when it comes to UFOs.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just that Wisconsin's kind of intellectual, even though people don't think of us like that. It's we have Big Ten schools and we're cold, and so what do we do during the winter? We read, or we write, and we do science, and we we
We
skywatch
skywatch
for
for
UFOs.
UFOs.
Um, I guess final questions. If you had to make a prediction, do you think, let's assume that Donald Trump is elected just because otherwise this isn't very relevant, but let's just pretend he is. Do you think that anything's going to actually change?
I, as far as the
Sure.
UFO thing, it's really hard to say just because of the interest as far as national security goes. I think he might have more of an open platform to the discussion, seeing that he came out with it. But as far as the uh, Secretary of Defense and what he has to weigh in, but Trump, like we said, he's freewheeling, so he might slip up and say something, but then also he has a credibility issue when he talks because he does like to exaggerate. He does like to add unnecessary details to stuff that might not be as truthful as we would expect. In it seems like the UFO field is kind of split there. The old crackpot tinfoil hat brigade is a lot different than a lot of people doing some serious science behind propulsion and interspace travel. And it seems like there's that faction seems to be emerging more.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to say, but the more we can learn about it in an official capacity, and then at least have that on the record so we can weigh it as a public, I think it's better for discourse all the way
Yeah, I
around.
agree. I think my expectations, I don't think, as Tim Burchett said, that they're going to pull out alien bodies and a spaceship and then show everyone. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to get an increased amount of information is going to start to come out. I do think he's going to be at least tacitly supportive, but the problem with the UAP issue and the UFO issue is if there is really something there, which I believe there is, it kind of sucks out all the oxygen of the room for all other political agendas. Like feel people just have to be like, wait, what? You know what I mean? Like it just kind of just every policy that you're trying to work on as a politician, whether it's, tax cuts or whatever, food security, like everyone just has to stop and kind of talk about this instead. And it's kind of like, sticking a large stick in the bicycle spokes as it's going. So that's kind of the challenge is like, I can see that, I imagine that they're going to release some more information, but I don't expect something catastrophic to come out during the next 4 years if Trump is elected. So that's my opinion. I think that's kind of
It,
roughly where I'm at.
yeah, it's interesting how they can kind of inject some of this UFO UAP stories into the news as almost like a distraction or a cover for something else. So I think that's unfortunately the bludgeon that it can be used for right now. But I think it's something that the public needs to be aware of. I know the public is a lot
Yes.
more receptive to the visitors from another planet or some kind of alien tech than they were,
Yeah,
pre X
I actually
Files.
have
Whether
data on that
that's
too. I actually have data on that. It's grown by about 70% from the late 90s. What that means,
wow, that's
currently,
that
like if you do the math, 34% of America believes that aliens have visited Earth at some point. 34%. And that amounts to about 113
wow.
million people in America believe that.
Yeah, that's a substantial. And what's that up from like the
It
late
was,
'90s or mid
it's now
'90s?
34% of America. It was 20% of America, which is a pretty big
Okay,
increase going from 20 to 34%. I know it doesn't sound exciting, but when you're talking about millions and millions of people that are suddenly believers, it is quite a difference, you know, and
yeah,
almost 70% of
definitely.
the country believes that the government is not being truthful about what it knows about UFOs.
Well, in living through the past 10 years, it's not surprising that a lot of people have that sentiment about government transparency or truthfulness. So I guess that comes with the
Well,
terrain.
we'll keep watching, and it was wonderful having you on. So thank you very much, Jeff. And if there's anything you need, just let me know. Just gonna close that right there. If you want to say anything, I don't know.
Yeah, thanks for having me in. I had a lot of time, a lot of fun breaking down the topic, and look forward to anything else drops in the next 8 or 9 days, and we can hop on
Yeah,
and do it
that
again.
would be. I would be. I'd be thrilled to have you back if the Harris campaign comes out with a platform. I would love to have the Democratic response to that.